Hello everyone, this is Creepy Dumpling. Today, we're going to talk about a MATRICIDE case that shocked China in 2016. On February 5th, 2016, Wu Xieyu's uncle received a text from his nephew. "Uncle, my mom and I are coming back to China for Chinese New Year. Please pick us up at Putian railway station tomorrow." Wu's uncle was thrilled. He hadn't expected his nephew and sister would come home so soon. After all, they just moved to America 6 months ago, as Wu was studying as an exchange student in the world-renowned MIT. But when he went to the train station the next day, Wu and his mother were nowhere to be seen. He tried to call them, yet no one picked up. It would be another 9 days before the police discovered the body of Xie Tianqing, Wu's mother and the uncle's sister, in her small apartment provided by the middle school where she worked as a history teacher. Her body was hidden under her bed, wrapped in 75 layers of plastic wrap. The space between each layer was stuffed with activated carbon, apparently to absorb the smell coming off from her highly decomposed remains. The police soon issued wanted notice for Wu. Suspect Wu Xieyuyu, male, born on October 7, 1994. Height, approximately 183 centimeters. Wanted for the murder of Xie Tianqing, his mother. Reward up to 50,000 yuan. Born to a blind couple in a small countryside town, Xie seemed destined for misfortunes in her life. Even to this day, neighbors recalled vividly how difficult life was for her family. There was little her blind parents could do aside from the most basic of chores. When the door to their house was not closed, which was not very often, neighbors could see her parents shuffling about in small steps, carefully cleaning whatever furniture they happened to lay their hands on. Under these circumstances, it was not surprising that the burden of taking care of the house fell on Xie, the eldest daughter, and her 2 siblings, even when they were still children. Xie's childhood, like that of many who grew up in 1960s in China, made her no stranger to hardship. Yet she learned to cope with life's difficulties by shutting other people out, sometimes literally. Her sister recalled that Xie would close the house door whenever there was someone approaching, afraid that they might make fun of their parents. Unable to get along with almost anyone, she had found solace in books. And perhaps thanks to this passion, she successfully enrolled in a university in 1986, a significant achievement. In those days, only 10% of the applicants were accepted into universities in China. In comparison, that figure had risen to 90% in 2024. But college life didn't seem to have made Xie any more outgoing. After graduating, she became a history teacher at a middle school, where colleagues remembered her as someone who rarely spoke to or greeted others. She never invited people to her home, and consistently turned down invitations to social gatherings. Even Wu, her son, recalled that whenever neighbors knocked on their door, Xie would lower the volume of the TV and tell him to be quiet, because the neighbors had come to bother them again. It was Xie's habit to shut other people out that allowed her son to hide her body for 7 months after killing her. He simply told everyone that Xie had moved to America with him, and people believed him. No one expected to hear from Xie herself. After all, she wouldn't have bothered telling them anyway. Coupled with her refusal to engage with others was an extremely pessimistic outlook on life. As far as her son could remember, Xie had a negative attitude toward almost everyone and everything, and often complained about how unfortunate her life had been. In the early days of her marriage, she was devastated by the fact that her husband, Wu's father, was often away on business trips. She once wrote to him, "You promised you would call today, but you didn't. You broke my heart. I'll remember this. I'm so useless and worthless. I wouldn't be missed if I were dead. You shouldn't have married me." Xie's personality had a profound influence on Wu in his upbringing, and in some twisted ways, though not through any fault of her own, contributed to his eventual decision to murder her. To outsiders, Wu seemed like the perfect child. He was polite, gentle, hardworking, and most importantly, smart. While not exactly a prodigy, he certainly outshone other students. He was always the top of his grade and excelled in nearly every subject. He had won multiple awards at the Chemistry Olympiad, a prestigious chemistry competition for high school students, and once recited the entire "I Have a Dream" speech by Martin Luther King, to the amazement of his teacher and classmates during an English class. He was also athletic. Every day after school, He would do push-ups before starting on his homework. He played basketball pretty well too. Among boys in his high school, he was known as the rebound king. All in all, Wu was perfect, perhaps a little too perfect. One of his classmates described him as someone who did not cast a shadow under sunlight. But it wasn't just that he had no shadow, it seemed he had no friends either. While he was friendly, his roommates found him hard to get close to. He never talked about himself and wouldn't join their conversation about video games and girls, though he would blush whenever someone told a dirty joke. But he wasn't shy or timid. He often initiated social interactions on his own. Whenever he saw someone he knew, he would greet them and pat them on the shoulder, if they were guys, and sometimes he would text, "Hello, what are you doing?" to a dozen people at the same time, much to their bemusement. In many ways, Wu's personality mirrored that of his mother, Xie. Though he was slightly more outgoing than her, at their core, they both preferred to keep to themselves and shut others out. Xie likely developed these traits as a defense mechanism against her family's poverty, the embarrassment of having two blind parents, and the burden of being the eldest daughter. Wu, on the other hand, became the way he was because Xie was his mother. To be sure, like most mothers, Xie loved her son deeply. But unlike them, she never shared her thoughts or feelings with him, very much in line with her character, and did not expect him to share his. She just wanted the best for Wu, and for a Chinese parent, that meant attending a good university and securing a good job after graduating. To her, that was what her son needed. To her, that was what mattered. Therefore, she loved him by being extremely attentive, so Wu could devote himself entirely to his studies. Wu's high school roommates recalled he would call his mother almost every evening to report about his day, including details like what he ate at the cafeteria or how much he spent on groceries. Even when Wu went off to university in Beijing, he only wore clothes sent to him by Xie. Apparently, he never bought any clothes himself. Xie also loved her son by being very strict, though she didn't seem to realize. She once told her students, at the middle school where she taught history, that her son was very independent and she never had to worry about his grades. But her students, who occasionally described her as a bit snobbish, thought otherwise. One girl she taught recalled seeing her and her son together several times. Xie always walked in front, with Wu following behind, his head lowered. It was quite a striking image. Xie was a small woman and Wu stood 6 feet tall. In a way, this reflected the power imbalance between the mother and son. The girl said she could immediately sense that Xie was the kind of strict mother that took care and took charge of everything. She and her classmates even gave Wu a nickname, Little Dummy, because he seemed like such a mama's boy. And indeed, Xie was strict. She didn't want Wu to associate with any kid whose grades were not as good as his, lest they exert a bad influence upon him. And given how high Wu's grades were, it meant he could hang out with practically no one. As a result, Wu wasn't even allowed to play with his cousin, Xie's own nephew, because the kid had bad grades and liked to swear. On one occasion, Wu invited a classmate to his home, and Xie immediately questioned him about his grades. When she found out that they weren't that great, Xie simply turned and walked away, leaving the boy embarrassed. He later overheard Xie telling Wu not to mingle with people like him, and he never went to Wu's home again. Xie had no issue making her son friendless. After all, she had no friends herself and seemed to need none. Curiously though, this didn't cause Wu to resent her. If anything, Wu really loved his mother. When talking about his childhood, Wu often referred to himself as a shameless child, though people who were familiar with his family didn't remember him doing anything particularly shameless. Wu said he was always afraid that he would become such a burden to his mother that she would one day abandon him. And this strange conclusion likely stemmed from Xie's tendency toward extreme pessimism. Xie hated video games. Like many Chinese parents of her generation, she viewed them as a form of electronic heroin, something that would ruin her child's life. One time, she caught Wu playing video games behind her back, which sent her into a state of hysteria. Wu was little at the time, but he vividly remembered his mother's outburst with horror. She didn't scold or beat him. Instead, she kept on slapping herself and pulling her hair, all without saying a word. Perhaps in her mind that tended to see the worst in everything, she had failed as a parent, and her son's future was ruined. In Wu's mind, however, he had failed as a son, having caused his mother such agony. Probably from that moment on, He decided that his sole mission in life was to make his mother happy, to make her proud, and the way to achieve that was to do exactly what she wanted. Excel in school, get good grades, and attend a prestigious university, which would ultimately lead to a successful life. In his confession, Wu told the police he never enjoyed being the top student. To him, it was an incredibly monotonous and exhausting obligation, and every day he lived in pain. Everything I did, he said, was to make my mom happy, to make her proud of me, to lessen her burden so she didn't have to worry about me, so her life could be a little easier. But as suffocating as Wu and his mother's relationship was, it functioned, and had everything gone according to plan, Wu would have graduated from a top university with excellent grades and landed an enviable job with a high salary. He would have married, had children, and she would have become the moody grandmother that her grandchildren found hard to like. Or maybe she would eventually escape the mental prison she had built for herself and become approachable. Whatever the case, things hadn't gone according to plan, and what happened in the end led Wu to murder his own mother. It all began with his father's death. In many ways, Wu's father was the opposite of his mother. He was sociable, had many friends, and liked to joke around. But unfortunately for Wu, his father was not home very often. Shortly after Wu was born, Wu's father stopped going on business trips, but the aluminum factory where he worked was 30 kilometers from their home. As a result, he had to wake up before dawn every day to go to work and wouldn't return until after dinner time. But despite his father's lack of presence, Wu loved him deeply. Wu said he didn't know his father very well, but thought him very kind and gentle. His father taught him how to play basketball, and in the little time they had together, they often played sports and talked about Wu's school life. In a way, his father was the only friend Wu ever had. When Wu's classmates saw him as someone who cast no shadow under the sunlight, his father was the faint shadow he did cast, a shadow his classmates couldn't see, and this shadow disappeared when Wu was 16. Wu never knew his father had cancer, though he was aware that his father was ill. Wu's paternal grandfather died from liver cancer at 39, and his son, Wu's father, contracted chronic hepatitis at a young age. As far as Wu could remember, his father was always taking pills and had to visit the hospital, usually accompanied by his mother, every weekend. Wu said he had always feared that one day his father would leave him, that he would die. Sadly, his fear came true. In 2008, his father's hepatitis developed into liver cirrhosis, and after an unsuccessful surgery, it turned into liver cancer. The cancer spread rapidly, and it didn't take long for the hospital to stop treatment, deeming the situation hopeless. In the end, Wu's father returned to his hometown, which was not far from Wu's mother, to live out his final days. Although Wu's parents kept the bad news from him, he quickly noticed how his father's condition had deteriorated. He remembered his father's face taking on an unhealthy grayish complexion, with needle marks visible all over his hands. After being turned away by the hospital, Wu's father began receiving treatment at a small clinic. At that time, Wu hadn't seen his father for a while, as he lived in the school dormitory during the weekdays and attended cram schools on the weekends. When Wu saw his father again, he was little more than skin and bones. Wu said he was so shocked that he ran out of the clinic before his father even had a chance to speak to him and started reading, trying to calm the horror in his mind. He regretted that day ever since. He said his father must have felt very disappointed and thought his son didn't love him at all. Wu's father passed away 2 years after his cancer diagnosis, at the age of 43. Wu was at school when it happened, and he quickly returned with his mother to his father's hometown, where the body was to be cremated. It was only then that he learned his father had cancer. During the cremation, Wu's aunt and grandmother, his father's sister and mother, repeatedly cried out his father's name at the burning casket. They begged him to get out of the cremator, to escape the burning flames and run back home. Wu was stunned, while his mother sobbed beside him in silence. Wu said, at that moment, he hallucinated and saw a streak of smoke rising from the cremator. He became convinced that his father hadn't died, but instead departed for another world, where he would be waiting for Wu and his mother to come home one day. According to Wu, his father's death was the turning point in his relationship with his mother, and it was from that moment onward he began to develop the idea of setting her free by killing her. After his arrest, he told everyone, the police, the lawyer, the prosecutor, and the judge, that he really loved his mother. But it seemed his love was more driven by a sense of guilt, a sense of responsibility, rather than genuine affection. Growing up, he blamed himself for Xue's chronic depressive mood. He thought it was his fault because he was naughty or because he didn't do well enough in school that she wasn't happy. Therefore, he must do right by her. He must love her by doing what she wanted, by living up to her expectations. In the end, it appeared that the parent Wu had truly loved was his father. During his trial, this is what he said about his dad.
我爸以前也为我骄傲过。我中考考第2名，我考福州市第2名的时候，他带我去，他带我去英语培训班教学，然后他跟那位老师说，他说我儿子考了福州市第2名，这是我最开心的时候了。然后半年之后他就死了。然后他死之前，我期中考才考了第2名的，他死之后我期末考考了第1名，没有了，我这可都是第1名，没有。
你是说你父亲去世了？
After her husband passed, Xue's mental state took a turn for the worse. If anything, he had been the only person she had ever truly opened up to, and his death left her nearly suicidal. In September 2011, Xue wrote to her late husband in her diary, "Your death shocked me. You have no idea how much damage losing a spouse can do to a woman. Nothing can make up for this loss. It's only because of our son that I haven't decided to give up on life." 5 months later, she wrote to him again, "I've completely lost faith in life. I've no confidence in doing anything. When I clean the house, it feels like it will never be clean, and it's the same when I wash the clothes. I know I'm not normal and need to see a therapist, and I know my problems are caused by our departure. Do you think I should follow you? Would you wait for me?" As Xue contemplated suicide, she withdrew even more into herself. It seemed that her husband's death triggered the paranoia she had experienced as a child. She used to think people looked down on her family because of her blind parents, and now she believed people had come to bully her and her son because she became a widow. Except nobody bullied her. When her husband died, his friends and colleagues raised a significant amount of money for Xue and her son, only for her to turn it down, insisting the money should go to her husband's mother instead. The middle school she worked at also tried to offer her financial assistance, which she consistently refused, saying she could provide for herself and her son. It pained Wu to see his mother's mental state deteriorating. He pitied her. He said after his father died, his relationship with his mother reversed. In his mind, he had become the parent, and she had the child. He said, "My mom is like Juliet who lost her Romeo. She was so innocent and so kind, but she didn't understand or like this world very well." He decided to focus all his energy and attention on making her happy, and to him, that meant getting into a good university. So, Wu studied even harder after his father's death, and his hard work paid off. Just before the National College Entrance Exam, where millions of Chinese high school students compete for university spots, Wu was elected for the early admission program at Peking University, one of the best in China. For reference, it ranked 17th in the QS World University Rankings in 2024. This program granted Wu an additional 60 points on his exam score, giving him a significant advantage in the admission process. However, Wu did not do well on the exam, by his own standard that is. He actually ranked 100th in his province, out of 260,000 students, placing him in the top 0.03%. Xue said little about his score, but to him, it was proof that he had failed her, that he had let her down. Determined to make up for his failure on the exam, Wu began his college life in Beijing. This time, he determined to make his mother proud by becoming the best student at the top university in China. So, while his peers were enjoying their college lives by getting into relationships, binging on video games, or joining clubs and societies, Wu lived his as though it were just another year of high school. He worked as hard as ever. Not only did he maintain a grade point average of 3.8 out of 4, he also impressed nearly every professor whose class he attended. In his second year, Wu decided to pursue studies in the US, like many of his classmates, which would help pave the way for his goal of becoming a university professor. He began preparing for GRE, which was required for admission to graduate or doctoral programs in America at a tutoring agency. Eventually, he scored 335 out of 340, placing him in the top 5% globally. For this achievement, the agency rewarded him with 6,000 yuan, approximately $850. Even at China's top university, Wu was considered a top student. But for Wu, there was a huge problem. He was no longer the best. He no longer ranked first in his class. Instead, he ranked second. According to Wu, this caused his world to collapse. He said if he was no longer the best, he would be worthless to his mother, who would stop being proud of him and his life would lose its meaning. Wu attributed his failure to a lack of hard work, so he pushed himself even harder, often to the point of exhaustion, which he tried to overcome through sheer willpower. He wrote to himself, "I can bend the laws of nature with enough willpower. I will become the Ubermensch as described by Nietzsche. I will become a machine like the Terminator in the movie." But Wu was not a machine, and it didn't take long for his willpower to falter. Near the end of his second year in college, he was approaching a breaking point. He said, "Every day I struggled with despair. I was so tired, but there seemed to be no end." What ultimately broke him was the crushing realization that he wouldn't qualify for an exchange program to America, not because of his grades, but because he couldn't afford the living expenses, not with the meager salary Xie earned as a middle school teacher. And if a 12-month exchange program was beyond their budget, there was no way he could ever afford a 2-year graduate program, let alone a doctoral one, even with full scholarship. Therefore, it was all over for Wu. He would never be able to make his mother proud, and all his efforts felt pointless. He stopped attending classes and instead spent his days reading online novels in his dorm room, to which he became deeply addicted. These stories often depicted the luxurious and romantic lives of young heirs to wealthy families or giant corporations, people born with a silver spoon, who never had to work for anything yet had everything. Wu said he envied those people and wished he had never been born, because then he wouldn't have been brought into this world to suffer and his mother would have been a lot happier. Although Wu stopped attending classes, he maintained the habit of reporting his daily life to his mother, who was completely unaware of the psychological turmoil her son was going through. One day, during one of their phone calls, Wu told her that he had been thinking about suicide, probably the first and last time he ever truly opened up to her. Xie, in her typically pessimistic fashion, responded, "You want to kill yourself? Then there is no reason for me to live either. If you're going to commit suicide, I might just as well die first." Her words, as it turned out, planted a very twisted idea in Wu's mind. Wu's favorite book was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and he was fascinated with the concept of the greater good, which, in the story, the dark wizard Grindelwald used to justify his plan to dominate Muggles, the non-wizards. And for Wu, it was time to carry out his greater good. He had failed to become the best student in his university and would never be able to study in America. Therefore, he could never make his mother happy or proud, nor rescue her from the immense pain caused by his father's death. So to set his mother and himself free from the endless agony, he would first kill her, and then take his own life. Afterward, they would be finally reunited with his father, who had been waiting for them to come home. Wu was convinced of his decision. As a student of economics, Wu was used to analyzing people through mathematical models. To him, everything in life could fit into one kind of model or another, and what was worth doing could be calculated. According to his calculations, his decision to murder his mother was rational, loving even. He said, "The ultimate form of love is the willingness to do what is most important for a person, however extreme or unthinkable it might be. If I had let morality or laws stop me from freeing my mom, it would mean I didn't truly love her." As if to further justify his actions, Wu delved into extensive research on human souls and the afterlife, mostly on internet forums. He concluded that the soul would remain briefly in the head after death and planned to decapitate his mother after killing her. Then, he would commit suicide by jumping from their apartment building while carrying her head in his arms. From March to June 2015, Wu meticulously planned his mother's murder. He said he watched a lot of horror films to desensitize himself to what he was about to do. He also redoubled his resolve to free his mother from this world, drawing inspiration from films and novels. For example, in the film Inception, Mel convinced her husband to commit suicide with her, so they could escape their dream and return to their children. Also, in the novel Devotion of Suspect X, Ishigami loved Yasuko so much that he would help cover up her crime. Of course, Wu's plan matched neither of those stories, but he had become so lost in his own perverse reasoning that he struggled to distinguish fiction from reality. On July 1st, 2015, Wu returned to his home in Fuzhou from Beijing. To Xie, her son was home with her summer vacation and would soon begin his third year in university. She was happy to see Wu while he quietly prepared for her murder. In the days following his return, Wu ordered a handsaw, a surgical gown, waterproof fabric, plastic wraps, activated carbon, laundry detergent, air freshener, and various types of knives online. He planned to murder his mother on July 10th because it was the reverse of his birthday, October 7th, with the numbers reversed. In his mind, the murder was like a religious ritual, and he must choose a meaningful date to suit the holy occasion. But what unfolded next was anything but holy. It was a Friday on July 10th, and she had left home to attend her middle school's graduation ceremony. Afterward, she would begin her 2-month summer vacation. Meanwhile, Wu retrieved the tools he had hidden in the storage room and returned to the living room. A dumbbell bar in hand, he waited for his mother to come home. As the reality of what he was about to do sank in, his conscience made one final attempt to stop him. He pleaded with his deceased father, asking him to send a sign if he didn't want Wu and his mother to reunite with him. But nothing happened, and Wu knew it was decided. When he heard his mother coming up the stairs, he stood from the couch and waited. She opened the door, and as she was changing her shoes, Wu struck her head with the dumbbell bar. She collapsed instantly, facing him, and he struck her head 8 more times. After killing his mother, Wu did not dare to look her in the eyes, so he wrapped several circles of duct tape around her head, hiding her now lifeless gaze. He then tried to sever her head with the knives and handsaw he bought but found the task too difficult. And just like that, he abandoned his original plan to commit suicide. In his confession, Wu said after he struck his mother down, he saw her eyes widen and realized how painful death truly was. This realization made him decide not to end his own life. Wu didn't want to stay with his mother's body and checked into a 5-star hotel not far from their home. And just like that, Xie Tianqing, at 47 years old, was murdered by her own son, killed because he feared he could not make her proud. But Wu didn't know that his mother was actually very proud of him. When he was accepted into Peking University, she shared the good news in her diary with her late husband. She wrote, "Our son has done us proud. Please bless us from the other side." She knew of Wu's plans to study abroad and was prepared to borrow money and even sell her apartment to fund his education. She told everyone that her son was going to America and people could see how happy she was. As Wu sunk deeper into his depression, Xie was actually getting out of hers. Shortly before she died, Xie surprised her colleagues by joining a trip organized by her school. She was seen smiling more often and had become more talkative. To her, a new chapter had begun, now that her son was in university and striving toward a bright future. Before Wu returned home, she bought him a pair of Air Jordans because she knew he liked basketball and left them at her mother's house where she and Wu were supposed to visit that summer. Wu never got to wear the shoes his mother bought for him. Growing up, Wu was sexually repressed. He never had any girlfriends nor had he been intimate with any girls, because it would get in the way of his studies and his mother would most likely not allow it, though he had crushes on some of his classmates. When he was in middle school, he discovered adult films on his father's computer and had been addicted ever since. He said he was disgusted with himself and tried to quit, but failed. This failure led him to think that he did not deserve to be with any pure and innocent girl. He even considered castrating himself as punishment, but on the day he murdered his mother, he abandoned these moral precepts and decided to lose his virginity at the 5-star hotel he was staying in to a sex worker. He said he had never been in a relationship before and wanted to know what it was like to love someone, but since his time was limited, he chose to experience it through prostitution. He returned home the next day to clean up the crime scene. He said he repeatedly scrubbed the couch and the floor because his father would not want their home to be dirty. He then wrapped his mother's body in the plastic wrap he bought and filled each layer with activated carbon to absorb the smell. However, he hadn't bought enough wrapped carbon and had to order more online. For the next 20 days, Wu spent his days wrapping his mother's body and cleaning the apartment, while returning to the hotel each evening to solicit more sex services. In the end, he mummified his mother's body, encasing it in 75 layers of plastic wrap. When he finished, he hid her body under her bed and covered her face with a pot lid. He said he couldn't face his mother or the thing he had done to her. He left a dummy that was wrapped in the same fashion as her body in her bed, claiming that it would help her ascend to heaven. Before he went on the run, he installed 3 surveillance cameras in the apartment which he could access from his phone. He said he wanted to witness signs of his mother's ascension and his father's soul returning home, and to know when the police broke in, so he could end his own life. On the final days of July 2015, Wu checked out of the hotel he had been staying in. Having spent all the money he had borrowed from his classmates before returning home from Beijing, he decided to withdraw money from his mother's debit card. She had never told him the password, but Wu knew it was his birthday. He said he didn't even have to guess, and he was right. After taking his mother's money, Wu wrote an email in her name to her middle school, stating that she wanted to resign to accompany her son to America. The principal called Xie's phone several times, which Wu had taken with him, and no one answered. Eventually, they got in contact with Xie on QQ, China's version of Facebook Messenger, and sent her the resignation form she needed to fill out. Later, they received a signed form, sent from an address in Shanghai. Her colleagues found it strange, but knowing how socially withdrawn Xie could be at times, they didn't give it much thought. Wu then used his mother's phone to text his father's friends, asking if they could lend her the money they had once offered after her husband died, as she needed it now for her son's study in America. When they tried to call, Wu either ignored or declined, replying in his mother's tone that she couldn't talk at the moment. Although initially suspicious, they knew that Xie didn't like talking on the phone and preferred communicating through text, so they wired her the money. Using the same trick, Wu also convinced Xie's school to send her the funds they had previously offered. He then asked for money from his mother's family, mostly his uncle and aunt. For Wu, it was personal. He blamed them for not doing more to help when his father was sick, especially given how better off they were financially. He particularly targeted his uncle, Xie's younger brother, from whom he borrowed 560,000 yuan, or approximately $80,000. Before that, he had borrowed 200,000 yuan, roughly $30,000 from his aunt, Xie's younger sister. She told Wu that she was very proud of him and asked him to take good care of his mother while they lived in America. And in a way, Wu did go live in America. After killing his mother, he had imagined every little detail of their life together there. He was an exchange student in MIT, and she taught Mandarin at a local Chinese school in Boston. Every day after school, she would make dinner and wait for him to come home. Wu managed to collect about 1.4 million yuan in total, close to $200,000, and after Xie's school accepted her resignation, he went to Shanghai, China's wealthiest city, where he squandered the money he scammed on even more sex services and lottery tickets. He even fell in love for the first time with a girl named Lu, a sex worker he had once hired. According to Lu, Wu treated her very well. He covered all their living expenses and bought her whatever she wanted. He took her to Hong Kong once, where they stayed for 3 days. He also helped pay off her debt. Wu described himself as a servant or even a robot in the relationship who catered to Lu's every need. In a strange way, he seemed to have replicated his behavior in his relationship with his mother. For him, to love a woman, he must make her happy, however he could. Wu even proposed to Lu and paid her a few 100,000 yuan, or tens of thousands of dollars in bride price, a customary practice for men to get married in China. But in the end, it didn't work out, because as good a boyfriend as Wu was, he wouldn't stop buying sex services. After they broke up, Lu returned to Henan, her home province, for Chinese New Year in February 2016. Despite her objections, Wu followed and checked into a hotel near her home. On February 5th, they met for the last time in Wu's hotel room. Wu expressed how much he loved her and told her in tears that he wanted to take her to a place where they could live happily ever after. He asked her what she would do when he was gone, which moved her to tears. He then offered her a drink, which he had laced with sleeping pills. Lu took a sip, but noticing the strange taste, she immediately spat it out and the whole situation ended like a farce. On the same day, Wu texted his uncle, the one he had borrowed money from, informing him that he and his mother were returning to China and asked him to pick them up at the train station. When they didn't show up, his uncle tried to call but couldn't reach them. He then contacted friends of Wu's father to see if they knew where they were, and discovered how much money Wu and his mother had borrowed from everyone. On February 14th, Wu's uncle and the friends went to Xie's apartment, but no one answered the door. They called the police, who initially suspected that the mother and son had been kidnapped by angry debtors. When they finally broke into Xie's apartment, the room was completely dark and smelled of mold. All the windows were closed and the curtains had been nailed shut. The gaps around Xie's room's door were sealed with tape, and when the police opened the door, the surveillance camera Wu had installed started to alarm. When asked why he texted his uncle that day, Wu said he could no longer bear to leave his mother alone at home. 2 days later, Lu returned to the hotel to look for Wu, only to discover that he had already left. Scattered around the room were his broken laptop, phone, and hard drive, in which Lu found gigabytes of adult films, including the intimate videos they had filmed together. Apparently, Wu had tried to destroy them because he didn't want the world to know how filthy he was. Lu called the number on his phone, trying to find out where Wu was, and the woman who answered said, "How would I know? You should ask his mom." Lu was shocked. When they started dating, Wu told her that his mother had died while giving birth to him. After his crime was exposed, Wu became one of the most wanted people in the country. He bought dozens of fake IDs from the black market and started living under various aliases. Before he left Henan, he used his mother's card one last time to withdraw money and was captured by the ATM camera. This was the last image of him known to the public before he was caught. He eventually went to Chongqing, a sprawling inland city known for its mountainous landscape and cyberpunk view. By then, he had spent most of the money he had borrowed and started working as a male escort at the nightclub. He got a new haircut, stopped wearing glasses, and began wearing makeup, like many of his colleagues, and no one associated him with the wanted criminal from the news who murdered his own mother. Though he was not particularly handsome, he had a nice build, thanks to years of working out, and was fairly popular with women who frequented the club. He kept a low profile while working there. He did not like to talk about his background and always refused to take pictures with others, but he still stood out because of how eloquent he spoke and the fact that he was fluent in English, a rare skill among male escorts in Chongqing. His colleagues recalled seeing him talking to foreigners who visited the club a few times. People could tell he was different, and he told everyone that he graduated from Tsinghua, another top university in China, though nobody believed him. It seemed he didn't want to bring shame to his actual alma mater. As if clinging to his academic side, Wu also worked part-time as a teacher at a tutoring agency and often reposted articles about the economy and geopolitics on his social media account. He was once filmed reading aloud an article from The Economist, a British newspaper, about Hindu nationalism under Narendra Modi in India by a woman he was dating. In February 2019, Wu quit his job at the nightclub and started working as a waiter at a bar. 2 months later, he accompanied a coworker whom he was trying to pursue to the airport and was instantly recognized by the surveillance camera's AI. He was very calm when the police approached him. He simply told them, "I know what I've done. I will come with you." Wu was not very emotionally stable after he was arrested. He sometimes refused to speak for hours, and sometimes launched into agitated speeches before his lawyer about how he was prepared to die. More often, however, he just sobbed uncontrollably. Eventually, he calmed down and started writing long pages of confession in which he explained in great details about how much he loved his mother and how arrogant and deluded he was to think that he could free her by killing her. Despite being in jail, Wu cared a lot about how he was perceived by the world. He asked his lawyer if people now regarded him as a monster, and in truth, the public opinion was divided. For many, what he did was absolutely unforgivable. But for others, especially many millennials and Gen Zs in China, Wu killed his control freak of a mother to free himself, projecting their own experiences onto him. Wu's case was even adapted into an episode of a TV series, where a son murdered his mother who liked to control every aspect of his life. In the show, when asked why he killed his mother, the son screamed that because she was a demon and he had to kill her to escape her control. Wu rejected this portrayal of Xie. He said he didn't want his mother to be seen as a bad person. Wu's family was also divided. His mother's family, especially his uncle, demanded that he pay for what he did with his life. Murder is still punishable by death in China. Wu's uncle's business failed after lending Wu the money, and his wife divorced him after their nephew became one of China's most notorious murderers. Wu's grandmother on his mother's side was unaware that her daughter was killed by her grandson, and her family could not bring themselves to tell her. Wu's other grandmother heard the news and passed away not long after due to the shock. Before she died, she pleaded with the court not to sentence Wu to death, as he was the last surviving male heir to the family after his father passed. Wu also didn't want to die. He wrote letter after letter to Xie's family, begging for their forgiveness. Under Chinese laws, forgiveness from the victim's family may be grounds for clemency. However, they didn't forgive Wu, and in the eyes of the court, his remorse was not enough to spare him. On August 26, 2021, the Intermediate Court of Fuzhou sentenced him to death. He appealed the decision, and the case was delayed due to COVID. On May 19, 2023, the appellate court upheld the sentence, and he was executed on the last day of January 2024 at the age of 29. In one of the letters Wu wrote to his uncle, he mentioned that he had never truly lived until he began his life on the run. He said that he was amazed by how colorful life could be and wanted to explore the endless possibilities that it had to offer. He'd expressed how it pained him not to be able to share these experiences with his mother. Wu talked about the film The Mist, where the protagonist, believing that they were about to be devoured by a giant alien monster, killed his family and friends out of despair. However, he couldn't bring himself to end his own life and ran to the mist, prepared to die facing the monster, only to be met by the army arriving to save them.